This is Deborah Atkinson, and you're listening to Flipping 50, where I address your top questions and things you struggle with most so you can have more energy and less decision fatigue about what to eat, how to move, and you can change your thoughts to Flip 50 with the life and the energy you love in this second half. My guest today is good friend Summer Bock, and she's a leading gut health expert who coined the term gut rebuilding. She integrates her traditional studies in herbalism with modern research and a background in microbiology. After resolving her own slew of health concerns naturally by focusing on the gut bioterrain, she started teaching others how to do the same. She's certified in Integrative Nutrition through Columbia University and a 3-time Good Food Award winner for her sauerkraut recipes. She is the founder of the Better Belly Project and CEO at Guts and Glory, an online business that offers live coaching and natural solutions for digestive problems. You can read her blog at summerbock.com, and we'll be sure to put that in the show notes. Summer, thanks for being here.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here and just get a chance to talk more with you about digestion and some of these really fascinating topics.
I got to tell you, so we're recording this in the summer. It's appropriate any time of year, but so it's getting to be the time of year when it's state fair time. I kind of felt like I was at a state fair doing 3-time Good Food Award for sauerkraut. So you're a blue ribbon winner.
That's awesome.
That is like the Iowa State Fair, that is not shit on a stick. Sorry. So this is the good stuff, people. All right.
Absolutely. I mean, it's so different.
Yeah, so definitely. And we're talking so much about gut health during this time of year when we're all doing so much traveling and maybe we're barbecuing a little bit more. It's so appropriate. And you recently honored me by giving your feedback in a travel gut roundup episode where your answer to what would you do for traveling gut upset was some great tie-ins you added to stress, to exercise, and uniquely, you were the only one in the group who did address activity, to schedule change and your body liking routine. So you were so unique from the other responses. I'm so glad you're on, but I also want to dive in because I need you to school me, and I think probably our listeners. You mentioned 6 things that you would do during travel, and I really want to dive in to a couple that are foreign. So those 6 things were probiotics, bitters, magnesium, activated charcoal, baking soda, and quercetin. And I am guessing that potentially like me, listeners may have some questions about bitters first and quercetin second. Can you talk a little bit about those? What are they? What do they do?
Absolutely. Well, my favorite is bitters because I'm an herbalist and I'm very interested in how people have done things for thousands of years. And traditionally, bitter herbs have been eaten before meals as a way to help stimulate digestive juices. It actually creates more saliva. It creates more mucus down the lining of the esophagus to help food slide down easier. When you taste something bitter, your stomach acid starts being produced as well as the enzymes in your stomach lining. It starts increasing peristalsis. So peristalsis is when your digestive organs flex and move to keep the food moving downward. It's making room for the next meal coming in. And then it also helps with the pancreas as well as the liver to start squirting some of these gastric juices to improve digestion. So when I think of bitters, I'm actually thinking of it in terms of a liquid tincture. So it's something that you either spray or put a few drops of in your mouth. And the second that your tongue tastes that bitter flavor, it stimulates the largest nerve in your body called the vagus nerve to start doing that entire cascade of events that I just talked about. It's just utterly amazing to me. And I think of it as a way of creating some ritual around your meals. It's going to help get your body more into a parasympathetic, relaxed state of rest and digest. So I
love that.
Yeah. I always say take a little bit, 5 to 30 minutes before a meal, and try to do this before each meal.
Yeah. Love that. And, I know at our last meeting, so here we were, this is when I was having my gut upset, and you shared a little gift bag, and actually it has created a ritual. And the part of it that I find so interesting is you do have to be a little conscious. So you have to do it before your meal, but you stuff that into your bag, you carry it with you, and you just become more conscious of, I cannot wolf this down. I have to slow down. I have to think about it. I'm going to do this before that. And I find myself anyway, eating too much on the run in a standing position often, that this has really helped, not just the physical change of my gut and digestive juices, but it's actually caused that step of slow down. This is an event right here. Don't miss it.
I love that. That's so important to me. That makes me really happy to hear.
Yeah, I love it. Great stuff. And I love the packaging. It's so my color. So anyway.
Thanks. Well, so do you want to talk a little bit about quercetin then?
Yeah, please do, because this one's a new one.
So quercetin is an antioxidant. It's a flavonoid, and it's found in plants. So it's commonly found in your healthy diet. But I recommend quercetin supplements for people who are struggling with inflammation or allergic responses. So that's kind of why I recommended it for traveling, to have some quercetin on hand if you eat something that doesn't agree with your system. Mm-hmm. It's great to bring in an anti-inflammatory and anti-allergenic food that can, I guess it's more of a supplement. It's actually like a refined part of the food. You bring that in, and it's going to help calm down that situation. You don't want to have all that stuff come up when you're traveling.
Definitely. Great. So where do we get it?
Quercetin, you can find it in all the foods like leafy greens, tomatoes, broccoli, berries, things like that. But I would get it through a supplement company. You can always look it up on Amazon. There's a company called Jarrow that makes a really nice quercetin that I use and recommend for my clients.
Fantastic. Great support. All right. So let's talk about the root of the problem, really. So the reason we need all these things, or we need them in our 911 case when we travel or anytime, is probably very related to stress. So let's talk about the stress impact on the gut. What's the 411 there?
This is one of the most underutilized parts of healing the digestive system, stress. We have talked about stress and thought about stress so many times in our modern day culture that I think we're a little bit sick of hearing about it. Yep. I think we feel a little bit desensitized to it. And so people are like, oh, okay, yeah, I know. I got to de-stress. But what I've found is that when people are stressed out, they have a higher incidence of all chronic conditions, right? And the statistics show that stress causes 80% of all health concerns, health issues, which is really huge. But when it comes to the digestive tract, when you're stressed out, you're actually taking blood away from the digestive system, away from the organs, moving them into the limbs. It's called the sympathetic drive, or the sympathetic nervous system. And when you're in a state of stress, your body doesn't pay attention to things like absorbing nutrients, digesting food, creating more gastric juices. These things are super important. And when people are living in a chronic state of stress, over the course of a year, 2 years, 10 years, or like 30 years, you're talking about a person who is now nutrient deficient. Right. And then the other issue that we struggle with around stress in the gut is it interacts with the gut microbes. So stress, we say stress and we think of it as a mental thing, but stress is actually a physical response, and it's a chemical response. So you have all these stress hormones running through your bloodstream, running through your tissues when you're stressed out. And just changing your mindset isn't necessarily going to make those break down. You actually have to usually change your physical environment. You have to change the things that are producing that stressor. And when those stress hormones are running through the body, what happens is it starts communicating. Hormones and neurotransmitters are what I would call text messages between cells. So we have all the cells of our human body, and our cells communicate to each other using hormones and neurotransmitters. But bacteria are also cells. They're single cell organisms, and they're hanging out in our gut. They're living there. We should actually have 2 to 3 pounds of bacteria living in a healthy gut. And there should be many, many hundreds of different species in a healthy person. It's going to keep you lean. It's going to keep you happy, not depressed. It's going to keep you energized, and it's going to keep you from getting sick. They produce a couple different vitamins on site in your intestines for you to absorb. And when they start getting these text messages that you're stressed out, they start decreasing in their ability to function. Our healthy, good bacteria don't function well in that environment. And in fact, sadly, the pathogenic bacteria actually function better in a stressed out environment. So you can change the ecosystem. You can actually change the entire environment and what grows inside of your gut when you have stress present. And so I work with people who are dealing with anything from constipation to intestinal bowel disease to SIBO, which is small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. And something that I've noticed with all of these people is that if we address stress in their lives in a really big way, like we address what are the top 3 things that are stressing them out, and we start to make a game plan for shifting that, we see some of the fastest results. I call it a power move. It's a way to get closer to your goal of being optimally healthy just from addressing the stress alone. And I have tons of food recommendations. I have tons of supplement recommendations. I've got so many things, in my toolkit to help people. And lately, because stress is so endemic and it's such a big problem for folks, I'm making sure that I spend at least a little bit of time with each of my clients focusing on how can we reduce this stress piece. Because I've had some clients within 24 hours have all of their symptoms go away when they realized, oh my gosh, it is stress. Stress is messing with me. And they let it all go. Not everybody has the ability to do that within 24 hours. Most of us have a lot of changes we have to make for the stress to go away. But I've definitely worked with people who are like, I get it. I have to just stop. I just need to relax. I have to get off this hamster wheel and figure out a new way to live.
So good. So good, so hard, and so simple all at once, right?
Exactly. Well said.
Okay. So this next question I love, because again, I'm coming full circle back to your response, out of the 7 experts who gave their take on here's what's in my emergency bag when I travel. You were really the only one who pulled out the fact that your exercise, your activity level can change what's going on in your gut. So let's talk about that. How does exercise affect digestion?
Well, when you exercise, you increase peristalsis. Mm-hmm. So any kind of movement. Actually, every time you eat a meal, you should go take a walk after that meal. At the very least, do a few little yoga stretches or some squats or, kind of stand around, pace around if you can't actually go on a full walk. But if you can do a 20-minute walk after each meal, it's going to massively change your digestion, and it actually reduces your insulin response. So
yeah, I love that. And, that ties into if you're going to go to a week-long retreat, you're going to go to Duke University's clinic, they all do it. Every single meal, that's what happens. You go for a walk afterward.
I just think it's so important. It's something that I've been practicing more and more lately myself, because you do see such a huge shift with digestion. So we're talking about functionally, we're seeing a difference. The digestive system starts moving. Peristalsis happens. It allows for, everything to just keep moving around and get going. And then you're going to feel much better. But then with that, because the food isn't sitting and because you're not having a huge insulin response, it means that you're going to balance out the kinds of bacteria that live in the gut. And the truth about the gut is that you want to have a nice balance of healthy bacteria to bad bacteria. You probably will have some bad bacteria in your system. It's normal. But you just want them to be a very small amount of that ecosystem. I mean, it's kind of like mosquitoes or poisonous snakes. Like, we don't want to get rid of those in our environment. They actually do serve a purpose, but we just don't want them to be the predominant animal present, because that would be really hard,
Yeah, that would be bad.
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. That makes a ton of sense. Now I want to dive into something that you're the expert. I mean, you are the fermentologist. So let's talk a little bit about fermented foods and digestion. And I will have to admit, I know enough to be dangerous, Summer. So school me almost from, point one. What are fermented foods? You can go there. And when do I know I need them? And are they always good?
All right. Yeah. So I guess I'm going to tell a little story. When I was, this was probably like, at this point, 13 or so years ago, I was struggling with my digestion. I was also struggling with environmental allergies, food allergies, anxiety. I was having panic attacks. I had hives all over my body from time to time, and I didn't know what was causing it. It was extremely uncomfortable. I was miserable. I was overweight and puffy, and I didn't want to get out of bed. I felt so crappy. And I'd go to the doctor, and they told me I was fine because all my blood work looked fine. And I discovered through, I actually showed up to my doctor one day, and she's like, "What are you doing here?" I'm like, "What do you mean? What am I doing here?" And she's like, you know more about this than I do, Summer." I'm like, "Oh dear." And she looked at me and she goes, "Here's what's going to happen. I'm going to write a prescription. You're not going to fill it. I don't think it's going to do anything anyway. So what are you doing here?" I was like, oh my gosh, the last train just left the station and I'm stranded here. That's what it felt like. So I went home and I did a bunch of research. And this was at the time where you didn't just pop online and write gut health or probiotics or anything. Nothing would come up online. And I just remember going home and going through all the books that I had and just kind of trying to figure out what was going on. And I did discover from one person, her name's Donna Gates, she mentioned some of these issues that I was having as potentially being connected, and that at the root, they were all related to poor gut health. So I scrapped everything. I stopped taking all the herbs that I was taking for my liver, for my skin, for my anxiety, for my energy. I just scrapped it all. And I just started focusing on digestion. And then I went to a conference and this woman talked about probiotics. It was the first time I'd learned about probiotics, actually. And she said, try these out, see how it goes. And she gave me a sample. I tried them. And within a week, my digestion was working significantly better. And I asked myself, okay, this is great. Love that I'm feeling better, but what is the whole food form of probiotics? How did my ancestors get their hands on probiotics or get their bellies on probiotics? And that's when I discovered it was fermented foods. I did a little bit more research and was started looking up this stuff and found that, they actually fermented or pre-digested certain foods as a way to preserve them. And this was before refrigeration. So back then, there was no way to keep things good. So they would ferment foods as a way to help them last longer. Sauerkraut, kimchi, kefir, yogurt. These are all foods that last longer outside of the refrigerator once they've been fermented. So I found that really fascinating and started fermenting everything. I mean, literally from milk to butter to my veggies to beans to rice, like everything I could get my hands on to ferment, I was fermenting it. I was making vinegar. I was putting vinegar on stuff. I mean, it was just a nonstop fermentation festival up in my house. And I may have overdone it a little bit. I did have to back down. I've learned since then that traditionally, cultures who still have their hands on fermented foods and have their diets, centered around this magical food, they tend to eat about 2 to 5 bites of fermented foods with a meal. We're talking a very small amount. And that's very different, in our culture. We're like, oh my gosh, if it's good for us, more must be better. So, I did overdo it and I had to back down. And this is just something that I realized, like, as I started to get better, I started to spread it to my clients and my roommates and their friends, and everybody started partaking in this fermented food revival and noticing a big difference with their digestion. I'd say the two biggest results that people get are ending constipation and reducing sugar cravings. So that's like pretty quick. Within the week, most people see those results.
Wow. Those are big. Both of them.
Yeah, they're really big. I mean,
that is probably number one and number two most common questions or complaints for many of our listeners right here.
Absolutely. So I would say, just start with that amount, and, just like I always say, 2 forkfuls of sauerkraut or kimchi before your meals. And you can start small. You can start with 1 bite. You can start with 1 bite once a day. I always remind people, like, you're bringing in a whole ecosystem. You're bringing in all these bacteria.
Yeah.
The thing that all of these foods have in common is that the ones I listed so far, they're probiotic rich. So they are filled with the good bacteria, but they're also filled with prebiotics. Prebiotics are, foods that feed bacteria. So we have probiotics, the actual bacteria, and then we have prebiotics, which is their food. And then the fermented foods also contain lactic acid. So lactic acid is a sour flavor. It's almost like vinegar. Vinegar is acetic acid, but that sour flavor in unpasteurized, naturally fermented sauerkraut and kimchi and yogurt and kefir and things like that. A sour flavor is lactic acid, and it serves as an antimicrobial. So it prevents foodborne pathogens from growing, which is why it was so useful before refrigeration. But it also, within the gut, prevents pathogenic organisms from being able to take hold and grow. So when you start introducing this food into your diet, you want to kind of take it slowly, because it can start to kill off some of the microorganisms that shouldn't be living there and starting to make room for those probiotics. So you want to be conscious of that and take it slow. And then you asked me the question, like, are they always good for you? Or is there always a place for them? And I would say, if you have any reactions to them, flushing, histamine reactions, it makes your throat scratchy, I would steer clear for a little while. You have some gut healing work that you need to do preemptively before you can eat fermented foods. And I also would just tell you that there are some fermented foods that are better than others. So wine, liquor, beer, cheese, bread, chocolate, coffee, these are all fermented foods as well, but they don't contain probiotics in the same way. And most of them have been pasteurized. A lot of those foods are actually fermented for different reasons. They're fermented for preservation as well, but sometimes they're fermented for the psychoactive benefit, or they're fermented to make them more digestible. So that covers kind of the reasons that people ferment: preservation, to make it more assimilable, or to create some sort of like psychoactive effect.
Got it. Great wealth of information there. Let me go back and pick a couple of things out that I want to make sure that listeners are clear on. So when you said a couple of forkfuls, even starting with 1 before a meal. So is that key to getting that in there, down there first, so it's waiting for the meal to come on top of it?
The reason I say before a meal is because it does something similar to the bitters. Yep. It's the sour flavor that helps stimulate digestive juices. And so when you do things like that at the beginning of the meal, it's going to help you make better decisions about what you eat, quite honestly. And it's going to help cleanse your palate in a certain way. I noticed that when I started taking bitters regularly and when I started eating fermented foods regularly, it started changing the foods that I was craving. Before that, I would get up in the morning and be like, all I want is pancakes and maple syrup. Like every day, all I want is pancakes and maple syrup. Not the best choice for my body type, not the best choice for my digestion, not the best choice for my insulin levels, quite honestly. And I don't eat gluten. So then I was trying to do the gluten-free ones, but it's just not right for me. But if I do bitters or I do that fermented food beforehand, it sets me up to want fruit. All of a sudden, my taste buds want something different. So that's why I say before a meal. It's not required. You can absolutely do it at any time. I just say do it during the meal rather than in between. You really want to have breaks. I mean, this is maybe taking us to more of a gut rebuilding topic. I don't want to venture too far onto tangents, but you really want to be having 4 to 6 hours between meals where you're not eating anything. And that includes good things, even the fermented foods. You want to take a break. They're sour and they're going to be sour on your teeth. So you want to be conscious of that.
Yeah. Great feedback. And listeners hopefully are doing that for hormone balance anyway. Okay. So second question, I'm just going to start dabbling and I'm going to try this sauerkraut. Can I walk into the grocery store and pull anyone off, or what am I looking for and to avoid on the labels?
Oh, yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, I want everybody to be able to go in and get exactly the right kind, because there's the right kinds of sauerkraut, and there's the wrong kinds. When you go to the store, you want to go to the refrigerated section. You'll probably see kimchi and sauerkraut all, bunched together in this one little section, the refrigeration. A lot of natural food stores actually are carrying bigger and bigger selections of these products. And I recommend going for one that is stored in glass. I also recommend one that says specifically on the label, unpasteurized. Now, this is key. If it doesn't say that, it's most likely been either pasteurized or flash pasteurized, which kills the probiotics. And the whole point of eating this is not just for the antimicrobial effects of the lactic acid, but to get these live microorganisms into your gut, because they're not coming in any other way, except for maybe yogurt. And I'll be honest, I haven't really said this yet, but yogurt isn't my favorite source of probiotics because it's just more bacteria that are being made in a lab, just like probiotic supplements. And again, it's not the worst thing in the world, but I'm a purist. I tend to want to do it how our ancestors did it, because I think sometimes we try to make it better, but we don't always understand that there was a reason they did it that way. And with these fermented foods, you're getting that variety of the prebiotics, the probiotics, and the lactic acid. That doesn't happen in a probiotic supplement. So I want you to get the most out of this. So make sure it says unpasteurized. Look for vinegar. It should not have any vinegar on the label. If there's vinegar in it, it will kill off the probiotics. So vinegar pickles, vinegar sauerkraut, those are maybe good on hot dogs, but they do not contain probiotics, and they may never have been naturally lacto-fermented. So they may not even have any of that lactic acid present. So let's see, what else? When you pop the lid open, that's one way to tell if it was pasteurized. It shouldn't pop up because it shouldn't have been vacuum sealed. It actually will push out the lid sometimes because it is unpasteurized, which is why it has to be refrigerated. So check for those things. I think it's really key. And go to your local farmer's market. Find who is making it nearby. Try to get some local ferments. I think it's a really great way to do it. And they make all different kinds of flavors. Anywhere from like a curry kraut all the way to like Eastern European flavors. So I think you can really enjoy it when you find some of your local folks.
So fun. All right. Now I'm guessing, I'm just going to go out on a limb here, that some of our listeners, like me, may not have tried kimchi. What can I do with that?
Well, kimchi is outstanding. It's filled with ginger, garlic, onion. These are all very supportive of your immune system. And back when the whole avian flu breakout happened, there were chickens that were eating kimchi that never got it. They have shown studies of humans who are able to not get the flu when they're eating kimchi on a regular basis. It is such a strong immune support. So, I tell people if they're worried about the flu shot, I'm like, you better be eating kimchi every day. And actually, you have a better chance of not getting the flu from eating kimchi every day than you do from getting the flu shot.
Wow. That's a powerful statement right there.
It's huge. And it's in large part because of these probiotics. They also help support your immune system as well. But kimchi is spicy. And some of them have fish sauce or shrimp paste or oyster sauce. So some of them can be a little bit of an acquired taste. But I do teach people how to make very simple kinds of kimchi that might be a little bit more suitable for some people's palates, depending. I personally love the fishy, very, very spicy kimchi, but I think it took me a little while to get there. It kind of took some practice. But the chili flakes themselves also are really helpful in getting the right bacteria to grow in your system. So if you can't tolerate too much spice, learn how to make your own and just make it really mild.
Awesome. Okay. So you've given a ton of great information to a newbie and somebody who's really looking at how can I control what's going on in my own gut health right now, working on digestion. So hardest question of the day coming at you. Is there a question that I should have asked that I missed?
Well, I think what I would say that I just want everyone to know is I think that you should try making fermented vegetables at least once. I think everyone should know how to make it. And I think once you've made them, you really need to try them. Like try the fermented vegetables that you made on your counter at home. As simple as that sounds, it will change your entire relationship to food and to your body because you're being asked in that moment to take a bite of a food that sat on your counter outside of the refrigerator for at least a week, right? Sometimes a couple weeks, depending on how long you want it to ferment for. And in some cases, you might even scrape mold off the top layer and eat what's underneath and try what's underneath. And that is so outside of most people's comfort zone. And I remember the first time I did it, I was terrified. I was like, oh my gosh, am I going to die? Am I poisoning myself right now? I mean, I really woke up the next morning and was like, whew, all right, I made it. I mean, I was so scared because, we live in a culture that's just determined to sterilize everything, like antibacterial soap, antibacterial hand gel. Oh man, we're so afraid of germs. And we're actually killing off our probiotics that live on our skin by putting all of that stuff on our skin. And we're creating environments in our homes that aren't supportive for these bacteria that are really there to help us. And so if I could tell you to do one thing that would absolutely change your life, it's to learn how to make fermented foods. I'm happy to teach you guys. I've got some really quick tutorials and videos on YouTube. You can go to Fermentationist and check that out. But just learn how to make it, try it, see how it goes. It's going to be a life-changing experience for you because all of a sudden you're going to have to learn how to trust your senses. You're going to have to smell it. You're going to have to taste it. You're going to have to see, did it taste okay? Is it sour? And it'll change your life.
I love it. I see a challenge coming up for cafe members. So watch out, you guys. Summer, where is the best? And you mentioned, by the way, listeners, if you're working out, you're lifting, walking, or driving, I've got you covered. We're going to have links in the show notes. But Summer, where is the best place for listeners to go get more summer?
I recommend checking me out on Instagram at Fermentationist. I post a lot of recipes there. I post links to my blog when I write new blog posts. I also have my website, summerbock.com. I think those would be my two first choices. And then I mentioned YouTube for some really cool videos on how to do some of this yourself.
Fabulous. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you. It's an honor. I'm so excited. I really love your community and I love what you're up to.
Listeners, if you have a question, leave it below the show link at flipping50.com/summer. I love hearing from you, and I'm sure Summer would as well. If this episode was helpful, please leave a rating in iTunes. It really helps. And then share it with a friend. Surround yourself with a supportive community of women on the same journey. To get the most from this week's episode, check out today's show notes at flipping50.com/summer, where you'll find the juicy free downloads and the connections to Summer Bock, our guest. All the resources that we mentioned in the show will be there for you. So keep walking, commuting, or lifting. And what are you waiting for? Let's start flipping 50 together.